You're starting with the paradoxes already.
No, damn, it's only downhill from here.
How do you pronounce your last name? Bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie.
Yeah, so I mean, the French tell me how to pronounce it. They say it's bourgeois.
Bourgeois.
But you know, I'm like, mate, I'm Australian. My last name is Bourgeois, you know, like bushwhacker.
Bushwhacker. But isn't bourgeois like high class? Bourgeois high class?
Yeah,
Like the proletariat or something?
yeah. I think it's like upper middle class. Like bourgeois pig is something that people have used to describe me specifically.
Well, that doesn't sound very nice.
I know, but it's pretty funny. I've got a story about that. Like at Sydney Uni, you know, some sort of Marxist group of activists were like, "Oh yeah, man, sign the petition." I'm like, "Yeah, man, for the cause, you know, for sure." And I write down Drew Bourgeois, and they're like, "You taking the piss, man? Do you think this is a joke?" I'm like, "Man, by name and by reputation, you know."
Wow. Did you have to pull out your license and say
Yeah.
something like that?
It's a common problem.
It's still a bit hot for me.
Yeah. My good friend is first generation Australian, but his parents are Japanese.
Yeah.
He always makes fun of me for not being able to drink hot tea. Man up, white boy.
I can't do it. I have to wait ages. I
Yeah.
have to wait ages for the tea to cool down.
It's funny, like so I do these Zen sessions in Australia, right? It's a 1 week retreat, and first thing in the morning, as part of a dojo ceremony, you get tea served to you, and you drink it.
Is that
in this
like the tea ceremony?
Yeah, totally. But people in this space, like, they drink really hot tea really fast, and so you get these kind of big sips. It's all very like intense, but it's good because you're really tired first thing in the morning at like 3 a.m. and then these sips of tea, these intense sips, will just kind of give you this energy to make it through
shock.
until sun.
What time do you start in the morning, did you say? Like 3 a.m. or something?
Yeah,
Or 4 a.m.?
3, 4. I mean, some softer retreats you can start at 6, but I mean, it never really starts, does it?
So you're like right into the meditation stuff. You've done heaps of retreats. Because I think I first heard about the Vipassana retreat from you.
Yeah.
In the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never done a Vipassana in the Blue Mountains, but I certainly have a lot of friends who've done it. I do Zazen practice. So there's a community here in Sydney, the Sydney Zen Centre. It's part of a tradition that goes from Australia to Hawaii, America, and then to Japan, China, and India. And from there, I have no idea. But yeah, so it's slightly different, but I think you'd find that a lot of the forms of Vipassana and of a Zen session are very similar.
Zazen's pretty hardcore because you have to sit in a really specific position. Is that right? I don't really know much about it, but from what I've heard, you have to sit full lotus, and that's a really strict thing. Is that correct, or am I misguided?
Well, I mean, how are you sitting right now?
Well, normally, like literally right now, I'm just sitting.
Yeah, I mean, that's it.
So that's Zazen.
Well, I mean, it can be. I mean, it's some traditions and some monasteries that have very strict rules about that. You know, there's definitely some Japanese and Korean monasteries that I've visited where you have to be sitting full lotus, otherwise you're not doing meditation.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking like.
Yeah, but I think actually if you push those teachers even just the slightest little bit, they would crumble on that instantaneously, because there's only one moment for realization. It has nothing to do with you sitting or not sitting. You know, upon realization, there's not an inch of earth left on the ground. So how can you sit?
Whoa. I think that's a bit far out of my realm, but
yeah.
That's the stuff
Mine too, man.
That's the stuff I'm interested in. Oh man, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh man, it's my pleasure.
I know it's a bit
such
weird.
a good idea.
We got the microphones on and we're sipping on tea, and I don't know if the weather's really, I don't know if it's good for philosophical talks, but we'll just see what happens.
It's kind of grey, and I reckon that's good for philosophical
For
thought.
getting
you know?
profound.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look in Europe and they spend so much of their year inside because it's snowing outside, and they're all existentialists. And then
That's
Australian
where
philosophers,
existentialism comes from.
yeah, I mean, there's Australian philosophical traditions that are really realist, you know, and I just have a theory that's because we're too busy playing cricket and going to the beach, you know. The weather's too bloody good for us to be existential.
That's a good theory. So I want to ask you the forbidden question.
Uh-oh.
What is Zen? Am I allowed to ask that?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to say anything about it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I don't know. That's a pretty cliched answer, but there's something really truthful about the honesty of not knowing. You know, you can find yourself in any situation, and really, really touching where you are. I mean, I guess that's it. And it's not a linguistic thing, but it also doesn't matter what you say about it linguistically, because it's not a linguistic thing.
I love this blog post that you had. Man, your blog, there's so many hairy stories on it. You're like chasing off monkeys, running down hills bare feet, climbing bloody like a waterfall, stuck in the desert. It's just non-stop action packed. But one of the stories that really stood out for me was the showdown with the Zen master. Or I don't remember it exactly. I'd love to hear you sort of make another comment on it. So what happened? You went in and you said something like, or he said something like, you have to do 200 bows to the Buddha, and you said yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit more than 200. So,
more than 200.
Yeah, I can tell the story if you want.
I'd love to hear it.
I usually tell it up after a few beers, but yeah.
Well,
podcast seems like a good opportunity.
Yeah.
So I was in Korea, South Korea, and I went to this mountain, Gyeongsan, and I wanted to get camping and just kind of spend some time on my own. I had my tent. But I got off the wrong bus at the wrong place, and I'm just there in rural Korea, and everything's kind of written in these foreign characters. But I did see once.
It's got to be a traveler's nightmare.
I know, it was one of those situations. And then I saw a sign that said temple stay. I thought, okay, well, that's English. I'm just going to go to this temple and see if someone speaks English. And so I went there, and you know, this one monk spoke a little bit of English, Wonju. And he said, you know, you want to stay here? I said, oh, well, actually, I'm looking for a camping ground. And he kind of didn't understand me. And then after a while, I was like, well, actually, I'm really poor. So staying in monasteries, from my experience, has been really cheap and really rewarding. So maybe I didn't want to. I thought I was done with Zen, but I was like, when an opportunity presents itself. So he said, oh, you should meet this Grand Master. So I went, Daiwan was his name, you know, this... Anyway, so I went with the translator, and we met this grandmaster, and we're sitting there, and there's a translator and a few other people, and he says, oh, do you want to stay here? I said, yeah, sure. I mean, that would be great. He said, oh, do you have any experience doing meditation? I said, oh, a little bit.
So you're sort of downplaying your experiences there.
I'm just spewing words. But he said, how do you meditate? And I said, like this. And he said, oh, if you want to stay here, you have to do 3,000 bows overnight.
3,000?
Yeah, so it's a full prostration. So they have a practice in Korean Zen of doing... so prostration is when you're standing and you drop to your knees and then put your forehead on the ground, lift your hands above your head, and then stand back up. And so
that's one.
And that's one.
That's one bow to the Buddha.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So I said, yeah, sure, I'll do this, no worries. Not really thinking about it. And so I started. These nuns, really lovely nuns, they kind of brought me some soy sauce water because they were like, you need hydration. And I had, you know, those beads, like the meditation beads, where when you
on
do
a big
one
necklace.
Yeah, and when you do one, you know, mantra or something like this, you just flick to the next bead. I had a big set of these that was 1,000 and kind of rolled onto the floor, sprawled onto it. And
so that's how you kept count? Because that was my other question. How do you keep count of so many?
Yeah, just one, but I mean, I only did one, you know. So I did my first few hundred thinking I'm just going to go at it, you know, I'm just not going to stop. I'm just going to hit it as hard as I can.
Yeah.
And I probably got to the first few hundred and then my legs just didn't want to do it anymore. I was in the most pain I'd ever been. It's like doing 3,000 squats or something like that, you know. And I had a long time to go, and it started to get quite late. So the kind of monks and nuns finished chanting maybe 10 o'clock at night, and then I'm there on my own, and I'm kind of staring at this Buddha that I don't believe in, doing this really intensive practice, physically, mentally, spiritually. I just was destroyed. There was nothing left. I was just completely out to sea. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this for this kind of thing that I don't believe in? But there was this whole crisis of that. And sure enough, I mean, like, I remember just like stopping after, you know, all these ways through and just sitting there and just going, I'm going to give up. And I didn't. And, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell this story if I didn't know 100% that I did every one of those prostrations, you know.
So you did 1,000 of these Buddha bows?
3,000.
You did all 3,000?
Yeah.
Bloody hell, mate.
I couldn't walk for a couple of days, actually. It was quite intense. But then I got to stay there for 3 weeks and meditate for 16 hours a day.
Wow. Might need some meditation to even out all that activity.
Yeah.
Did you have heaps of like props? Were you walking around and everyone would sort of whisper like in the cafeteria, oh, that's the guy that, you know, did it?
Yeah, I mean, so they'd all kind of done it, you know, I guess, but there seemed to be this something special about someone who was so young and from a foreign country just coming in and doing it.
White guy.
Straight away, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was because I was young, I just didn't even have to think about it. Like now I would, you know, my back would hurt more or something.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. I don't know how you do that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how I did it either, but I'm really glad that I did. You know, meditation is not, in my experience, about finding these peak experiences. You know, it's the same with travel. You know, it's not really about going to the waterfall or about going to Disneyland. It's all the stuff in between. You know, and so if you're kind of meditating and you're looking for these special effects, you know, it's not it. I once on a retreat went into my Roshi, my teacher, and I told her about this profound vision that I'd had. She just kind of said, let it go. Ding a ding a ding, ring the bell, get out of here.
Whoa.
And it's true though, like it's kind of not what it's about. But I'm glad I had that experience, because if you don't have those experiences, those kind of intensified experiences, there's nothing to keep you coming back. You can't just be drinking tea and talking on podcasts all day.
Well, don't look at me. So you've done so much travel. Most recently, Solomon Islands. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's it like over there? What took you over there? Meditation or something else?
Yeah, no. So I heard this music. They kind of play these slit drums, you know, these slit log drums. And it was recorded in about the 1960s by this French guy, and a friend of mine actually found it in Melbourne library. Sent me these recordings, and I said, wow, this is some of the best music I've ever heard. I just have to go and check this out. And a friend of mine also...
So is this indigenous or traditional sort of sounding stuff?
Yeah, so it's the traditional music of the Ara people from the South Malaita Island. But a friend of mine also last year went to the Solomon Islands chasing this kind of incredible music from North Malaita, and he had a really amazing time. So he was helpful. He gave me a lot of notes. But so I got there, and I ended up in kind of living in this village, in this Ara culture. And I mean, they told me that I was the first white man to go there since kind of the French missionaries and stay with them or something like this. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, they're just so lovely. And they pretty much live still probably very similar to how they did 100 years ago or something. They build all their houses from things they find in the bush. They eat a little bit of what they can farm, but mainly what they can find in the bush and what they can fish. And and they still have their traditional customs.
So how did you have the connection to make contact with them? Or did you have someone you knew beforehand to arrange it? Like these friends you're talking about, did they already know them?
No, so I actually didn't use any of the contacts from my friend who went there last year. But again, it's just one of those things where you turn up and in the kind of ambiguity of it all, in the midst of not knowing, the gem emerges and you end up exactly where you need to be. You know, I just met some people and played them this music, and they said, "Oh, that's from my culture," you know, and you can go and stay with my uncle and you can just sleep on the floor and he'll feed you, and like you can take you to all these things, you know.
Was there a language barrier? Like, do they speak English or?
So they speak Pidgin, which is like a
Pidgin, for real.
Yeah. It's amazing, man. Like, it's funny. It's like, it's kind of similar to African English in that, you know, they kind of English came over with the colonizers, and then once they got rid of the colonizers, they were unified by the English language, but because it's no longer connected to this kind of Queen's English thing, it just becomes this other variant. So, I mean, things like, who name belong you, right? That's what is your name. And it's like,
wow, who name belong you?
Yeah.
So you can understand them, but it's somehow a different language.
Yeah, some people it was hard to communicate with, but a lot of older people were there and did schooling kind of when the British were there or whatever, and they had a bit of English chops, which is helpful for me because my Pidgin's not very good.
Pidgin. Wow. What was the weather like? Did you go swimming? It's hot, right?
It's really hot, but I was there during cyclone season, which actually delayed my plans a lot. It's this kind of thing, right? Like, you know, you say to someone, "Oh, I want to get to this place," and they're like, "Oh, it's pretty remote," but you take this ship, you know? And so I say, "Oh, well, when does the ship come?" So we have no idea. What you have to do is go to the shipping yard and just ask enough people just hanging around until you find out. And so I asked like all these people and they all give me different answers, you know.
Whoa.
But then I go to the office and then the office is closed because there was a public holiday 5 days ago. And then you figure out, okay, it's not going to happen for a while, so I'm going to find a different way. But they have this different consciousness about time there, right? They live on these islands. They live in really remote conditions. They have a lot of access problems. So your ability to get places, to travel through space, is contingent on events happening. If the ship comes, then you'll go to this other place. If the ship doesn't come, then you just have to stay where you are. And so, you know, for their like annual leave or whatever, for their jobs, the people who have jobs, they get 3 days travel time, and then they come up, and then if they're not there within that 3 days, then that's kind of okay as well. They just have this totally different consciousness around reporting time and being somewhere at a particular time. It's so different to here.
I sort of want to plant a flag about, you know, the concept of time, because another one of your blog posts really just struck me hard, and it was the one of them about time. But before we like get onto that, I want to just say that this travel edge that you have is a pretty sharp edge. I don't think many people I've known in my life have that much of a sharpness or ability to throw yourself to the wind and trust a foreign country so hard. Surely you've run into some pretty hairy situations where you're just like, this is way outside of my comfort zone. Like, what's driving you? Is it so much rewarding to be that far outside of your comfort zone, or are you just someone who's prone to being that much more open than the average Blow Joe like me? Joe Blow.
I think you know, there's so much fear and so much subconscious a kind of cultural animosity that we have, you know. It's just, you go to a place like the Solomon Islands and everyone is really different to us. The culture is really different. But time and time again, it's been reproven to me that humans are fundamentally caring for each other and fundamentally hospitable. And all of this kind of political stuff that we have on top is actually just some sort of fabrication of the mind. It doesn't actually exist. When you put people in a room together, they just always will care for each other. So yeah, I've definitely had hairy situations where I've gone, this is just too far. You know, I've had, in Egypt, I was in this tuk-tuk and this guy took me to a random place and he's trying to kind of mug me and I have to, you know, he stole my sunglasses and I'm like, joke's on you, they're worth like $1. And definitely, other experiences, like in this latest trip, I had gone on a trip with these guys from the village to, this ancestral island. We were coming back in this outboard motor. You know, it should be 5 people on this boat, but they've got about 10. And then we started to run out of fuel and it's raining and it just turns to the middle of the night and we're in open waters. And I'm kind of there, like soaking wet, kind of looking at the horizon. And I had the moment of like absurd happiness, you know, when things just seem so flooded. It's just it's a miracle, you know? I mean, I guess like it's not, I mean, I do tend to kind of chase these extreme conditions, but it's not really because I want to have those experiences or whatever. It's just I would rather hang out with the local people. And sometimes I'm lucky at that, sometimes I'm not, you know?
You must have been to so many countries. Because you were in Africa for a bit as well, right?
Yeah, in 2016, I spent a fair bit of time in Africa. I really loved it there.
And was that the same sort of approach, like immersing yourself in the local culture and trusting the hospitality of the local vibe?
Yeah, I mean, I went there to study the hand drums, like percussion, you know, Africa and drums, who'd have known, you know? But yeah, and so my drum teacher, who was this guy that I kind of got connected to, said, oh, you can stay at my dad's place in this village. And so I was literally living in the sticks. And it was amazing. I mean, I loved it there. The people are so friendly and you walk past, everyone's like, oh, Brony, white man, you know. And I feel like I was having a pretty legitimate experience. I was at the same risk of malaria or more risk of malaria than the local people. And I'm eating under the same conditions. You can get rice there, but you can't get this. You know, you're definitely not going to get any quinoa. And so there's limits on what you can eat. And
what's quinoa?
Yeah,
Meat?
Couldn't tell you. No, it's like a grain, I think. It's really, you find it in the health food aisle at Woolworths, apparently.
Oh, okay.
But so, and then I kind of got a girlfriend there as well. And so I was staying with her and living with her family. And I mean, I feel like these cultural kind of barriers, like the more willing you are to let go of your standards of comfort, the more of an amazing experience you'll have, you know, that and luck.
Wow. Was there pressure from the family for marriage?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a sad story. I tried to...
You don't have to share it if you don't want.
I mean, sharing is caring.
Yeah.
But it's also important because we don't actually get this perspective as Australians.
Yeah.
So I came back to Australia and I was still in contact with this girl and we really like wanted to pursue things. And I applied for a tourist visa for her. And I sponsored it. I got my dad to transfer me a lot of money. So it looked like I had, you know, ample to support us for this 3-month tourist visa that we were applying for. And, it got rejected. And so I called a immigration lawyer. She said that people from Africa actually just can't come to Australia, full stop. Right. Yeah. So it's like in Australia, because we don't have people immigrating that are under our care, we don't actually realize how blatantly racist and discriminatory and debilitating for so many people these kind of border enforcement things can be. Yeah, I mean, I felt like that was a violation of my rights as a Australian person, not being able to bring someone that I cared about into my country, into my home. It's just so different to so many cultures where they'll leave the door open.
Yeah.
You know, and really welcome you. It's an honor to welcome people into your house, and yet we have these kind of these policies.
Yeah. Yeah, I spent a little bit of time in Africa when I was much younger. I think I was like 12 years old because my brother was on missionary there.
Oh, wow.
And we had a family holiday to visit him on the missionary ship.
Oh,
so
wow.
we were doing evangelism work, going out and preaching the good word of old baby Jesus.
Yeah.
And total culture shock.
Yeah,
like,
man.
So many stories.
Where did you go?
Came from that.
Do you remember?
Yeah, we went to Ghana.
Oh, man, that's where I went.
Yeah, and then a little bit up to Togo for a bit. And then the stopover was in South Africa, Johannesburg. So just between those two. And that was a long time ago. I think I was only 12 years old, but so many things stuck in my mind from that.
Yeah.
Even just something as simple as the roads. You come back and you feel like you're driving on glass. It's that smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, like, for me, that's like something that's really important about travel, you know, because it does cost a lot of money and it does seem like this selfish thing. But I mean, you go and experience people's culture and you live with them how they live and you see what's important for them and what they care about and who cares for them. And then you come back here and something like appreciating the roads, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same with meditation, you know, to some extent you're sitting there on a retreat for a long time. And then you come back into your daily life and you somehow have this kind of residual appreciation of the quality of simple things. It's kind of like, if that's a good thing to try and do with your life, is to appreciate everything.
Yeah. Like that's a pretty, like if you could do that, you'd be basically acing life, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's any winning or losing, but there's definitely like a thing of, you know, like if you're suffering, you know, like, you know, you break up with a girl or something, and then you feel really sad, and then you realize that this sadness is a source of creativity or joy even. That's pretty wild. You know, the world's pretty cool.
Yeah. So what do you think? I'm going to ask you another forbidden question.
Oh, damn.
You can't get off the hook for this one because you're into meditating. I think I'm allowed to ask you this question. Are you enlightened? Or do you want to talk about what enlightenment is at all?
Yeah.
If it is even possible.
I mean, the immediate answer to the question, are you enlightened, would be, which is a no, right? I mean, I got into this heated discussion in this monastery in Japan after this intense thing had happened with this woman, and she was a nun who was a bra-burning feminist who actually just moved to Japan and studied under this Roshi, this kind of teacher.
What was her ethnicity?
She's American, right?
Right, yeah.
And then she kind of went from this kind of liberation movement to this really controlled life. I mean, when the bell rings, you do whatever you do, and whatever the teacher tells you, you do that. And she got really offended when I said, you know, there is no enlightenment. It's all bullshit. And I'm quoting the fucking Buddha there, man. Like,
yeah,
it's everywhere.
That's a very common response to people talking about enlightenment.
Yeah, I mean, the Heart Sutra, which is like the kind of core of it or something, it says, you know, there is enlightenment, therefore there is no enlightenment. There's this kind of logic going on, you know, is therefore not is. And I was just stating that, not as this kind of offensive thing, but that for her was like not acceptable for me to say there's no enlightenment. And to some extent I understand that, because I mean, who am I to say that, you know?
Actually, I think last time I saw you was at a Chris Abrahams gig in Sydney.
Yeah.
And you just finished your degree in philosophy. You were about to go off on this wild trip. And we got into a discussion about non-duality, about like there's no boundary between subject and world. And I had not heard any of this. So I was just, it was all bouncing off my thick skull. But I've since then checked out all these guys like Alan Watts and all those sorts of cats. And I can sort of get my head around this idea of non-duality. So, I mean, I'm not saying I can have an experience of it. That's a different thing again. But that's what some people, I guess, call enlightenment is having that moment of slipping away between the boundary of you being in the world. You are rather everywhere. So have you had those sorts of experiences when you're meditating?
Yeah.
Or otherwise
yeah,
not?
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? They talk about emptiness. I think it's sunyata in Sanskrit. In Buddhism, it's like the realization that there never was anything. And in that space that, when the mind falls away, when the body falls away, when self falls away. So, okay, Dogen Zenji, 13th century Zen monk from Japan, he says, to study Zen is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is for mind and body of self and other to fall away. And that falling away to exist timelessly. For me, that's a lived experience. To have mind and body of self and other just disintegrate into emptiness. And it's not like this kind of philosophical thing of, oh, well, there is nothing. Don't turn nothingness into something. It's more a state of being. And it's radiantly universal. I don't really have logic or words to describe that, but I kind of feel okay about saying it because I just think it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love talking about this sort of stuff. I think this is great. And I know I'm sort of aware of how funny it can sound because you're trying to talk about something which really essentially can't be talked about. It can't fit into words. But yeah. So are you enlightened? Yes. But I'm not going to say so.
Yeah, I mean, it's, these koans?
Yeah, I was going to ask you before. Have you done koans?
Yeah, so I'm a formal koan student, I guess, in the Diamond Sangha tradition. I actually have my book here, so maybe I can read.
Yeah, for sure.
One of these koans just to give you a little idea of what it's about. I mean, my teacher said to me once when I first started to kind of work with these koans, it's a question or an object of contemplation. And you just drop it into your mind, but the mind can't answer the question, right? You hear the mind ask the question, but it can't answer it. You just have to sit there in.
So the answer is an experience, not a thought.
Yeah, something like that.
Or something like that. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. You're the one studying it.
Maybe I'll do Chu Chi raises one finger, case 3 of the Wu Men Khan.
So what is it? Tu Chi?
Chu Chi raises one finger.
So Tu Chi is a Zen master?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever Chu Chi was asked a question, he simply raised one finger. One day a visitor asked Chu Chi's attendant what his master preached. The boy raised a finger. Hearing of this, Chu Chi cut off the boy's finger with a knife. As he ran from the room, screaming with pain, Chu Chi called to him. When he turned his head, Chu Chi raised a finger. The boy was suddenly enlightened. When Chu Chi was about to die, he said to his assembled monks, I received this one finger Zen from Qian Lung. I used it all my life, but never used it up. With this, he entered into eternal rest. And Wu Men, the compiler's comment. The enlightenment of Chu Chi and the boy has nothing to do with the end of a finger. If you can realize this, then Qiang Lung, Chung Chi, the boy, and you yourself are all run through with a single skewer. Chung Lung made a fool of old Chu Chi, who cut the boy with a sharp blade. Just as the deity Chu Lung raised his hand, and Hua Shan, with his many ridges, split in two. So yeah, I don't really know what that means, but
whoa.
But the center of that case is definitely this one finger Zen. Yeah. I mean, you asked me, what is enlightenment?
So you could have held up one finger.
Yeah, but, there's also something in here. I mean, Chuchi's kind of really giving this lesson. If you imitate that, I mean, you'll lose your life. He'll chop off your finger.
Yeah.
There's another comment in that, like, well, what is the boy's enlightenment? I mean, for me, it'd be like,
yeah. I can't imagine what it's like to get a finger chopped off.
Yeah, it's fucking painful, I reckon.
Yeah. Especially then to have your master like tap you on the shoulder and say, make more comments on it.
Yeah. But it's funny, I always talk way too much about these things,
It's perfectly all right. I've given you free license, man.
I know.
I mean, we're in the same boat. It's just that you're like 1,000 times more experienced.
No, man. I mean, we're both born right now.
Wow, that's zen.
Yeah.
That's zen,
baby
bro.
face, man.
How old are you? I don't even know.
27.
Youngin.
How old are you?
29.
Oh, damn.
But what is age, right? Really?
Well, I mean, yeah, totally.
Who's lived more?
It's impossible
I think
to know.
I think you've been to more countries than me.
Oh man, that's not a valid metric.
No. Oh, that reminds me what I was going to ask before. So, time. This actually segues nicely into time. So, damn, I'm asking you something that's not meant to be spoken about again.
It's cool, man. I actually agree with what you just said. We could talk about anything,
Yeah.
The hesitation is the problem.
Well, I'm working on that. So, one of your blog posts was something about how you'd been up on the mountain spending time meditating, and you'd like not had a clock or something, or no contact. And you said something like you'd lived 100 years, or time had completely slipped away. So in my meditation, I've started to see glimpses of that sort of realm, I guess, or state of mind, or something like that. So I don't know what you want to say about that, but if you can have timeless experiences when meditating, why not just go off and disappear into that world? Wouldn't that mean like a longer life, a richness to life?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're never not there, right? I mean, there's an infinity in every moment, like I used to do this thing a little bit of just listening to a really slow metronome. But it doesn't matter whether it's fast or slow. I mean, there's still an infinite space in between them. It's to do with like a quality of mind. So I've definitely had experiences before where I'm on retreat and you spend a lot of time when, it's this thing that happens all the time. It's a thought pattern especially when you're meditating, and especially on the first few days of a retreat, where your mind will come back to, oh, I just wish they'd ring the bell. Or, oh, geez, I just wish I wish lunch had come, I just wish, I want to go and have a rest, and then you're always thinking about the future or the past. And then you make an active practice in sesshin to silence those thoughts and come back to where you are. And doing that enough, opens up this feeling of timelessness. So after 3-4 days, I often have the experience of just losing track completely. I mean, you can kind of conceptualize all these things about it, but if you sit there and watch, like a beam of light just kind of moving with the sun, I mean, that takes forever. The watched kettle literally never boils.
Wow. I don't know if I could watch sun moving across the floor.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better to do when you're meditating.
Yeah.
But that's, it provides these kind of insights, like when you fall asleep and then you wake up like a second later. I mean, what does that mean about our conscious reality of time. And I think even, I don't know too much about quantum physics, but I think actually the latest understanding is that like time is completely relative and not kind of this objective constraint that's out there in the world. It depends on so many conditions. It's like interlocked with gravity, and it's interlocked with all of these physical forces. I think time's against my religion, you know?
Wow.
I just have no faith.
What's your religion again? Buddhism.
Yeah, Drew Bourgeoisism.
Christianity. Early ages Christianity.
Yeah, man, I'm so into plain chant.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've definitely had like crazy realizations like that. Standing in the center of infinity.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's one that I had. And Finn, our friend Finn, actually turned up right when I'd been sitting there. And I think we were house sitting or something in the gong. And he turns up after his day, and I just look him in the eye and I go, I'm standing in the center of infinity like this. And he goes, man, I have no idea what you were talking about.
But so how do you stand in the center of infinity when you have no legs?
I don't know. Well, you can't escape the center of infinity.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I guess you wouldn't. I guess you would be in the center of infinity. You couldn't do something. Well, I don't know. Maybe you can. Maybe because it's all infinite, it counts standing as well. Infinity was one of those, like, online, I guess, psychological mechanisms that I took an interest in for a bit. And I found all these people talking about, like, it was this sort of fringe meditation talking about how these mathematicians had gone crazy trying to deal with infinity, and that was sort of their way of approaching enlightenment through maths. So it wasn't the path of meditation or knowledge or religion, but it was like hardcore maths also leading to the same summit. So that old thing about all paths lead to the same peak or something like that. And the way they did it was trying to tackle infinity. Like, how do you quantify infinity? What do you do to put it into an equation? What do you do to... Because you can't. It's a complete... I mean, even just now I'm getting a bit of a sense of the, like infinity, the pushing up against the wall. And I think some of those mathematicians really got frustrated with it. Like, it wasn't a very blissful enlightenment. It was more like a insanity. But yeah.
Yeah, I was almost going to study with this philosopher that I'm really into, Graham Priest. He's a really hardcore kind of logician, looks a lot at this mathematics.
Alive or dead?
He's alive and he's kicking.
Australian, European?
He's American, but he was posted in Melbourne University for a while, but now he lives and teaches at City Uni in New York.
Yeah.
But he wrote this book, Beyond the Limit of Thought. He's really interested in these paradoxes that occur at the end of thought, this hardcore logical way. But one of the things he was talking about was like set theory, this way in mathematics of defining and then dealing with sets of infinity as mathematical objects, and how this kind of opened this whole world of mathematics. I mean, he calls himself a non-classical logician, and believes in like a dialecticist. So you can have...
I need to get my head around this. Non-classical logician.
Yeah.
So it's logic, but not from like your Plato's and your Aristotle's.
Exactly. So like, so Aristotle has the law of non-contradiction, right?
Yeah.
Either it can exist or it can't exist, right? Either it is a teacup or it's not a teacup. And I mean, that just flows through to the whole of logic. I mean, like, it's all Western logic is based on that. I mean, he did a lot of Zen training, and it's a perfectly legitimate question in Zen. Like, there's a case of an old teacher standing in front of an assembly and holding up a staff, and he says, call it a staff and you lose your life. Fail to call it a staff and you deny reality. what is it? Speak.
Yeah.
I mean, no one fucking says anything, you know, but like you could have just said, it's a staff. I don't know. Like, but anyway, or you could have like taken it and hit him over the head with it. That'd be a quite nice one.
Actually,
zen.
I think there's a Zen story about that.
Yeah.
That Alan Watts tells. Can I interject?
Sure.
That so the Zen teacher is walking with his students, and he picks up a stick and he says, "What is it?" Because you're not meant to hesitate. The student hesitates, so he hits him with it. And then another student says, "Give it here so I can see." And then he throws it to the student, and the student hits the teacher with it. But so tell me about this non-classical logician.
Yeah, so we have this law of non-contradiction, right? Can't be and can't not be.
Yeah.
Now in India, I think it's Nagarjuna is this Buddhist philosopher, Indian Buddhist philosopher, who wrote a lot about mathematics and logic and things like this. He has like a quadrilemma. So you've got two things there. Either it is or it is not. He approaches logic from this position of 4 options. So it either is not, is and is not, and is neither is nor not. So, but you know, like this, I mean, it's a paradox, right? Is and is not. It's a teacup and it's not a teacup. You're existing and you're not existing. You're speaking and you're not speaking. There is a self and there's not a self. I mean, these are the fundamentals of a lot of Buddhist traditions in bringing about insight. And he's just really interested in that. I mean, you know, then to come back to this set theory thing with mathematics, you know, you get this paradox when you say, I mean, they call it the village barber paradox, right? So the village barber cuts everyone in the village's hair who doesn't cut their own. So does the barber cut his own hair? Because he's cutting everyone who doesn't cut their own, but then he would be cutting his own. You see what I mean? It's this cycle paradox, right? So the set of all sets contains itself, and you get this loop, this paradox, and his kind of argument is, well, that's something to do with the boundaries of thought, and you find it in all these different schools of philosophy from all around the world, these limits of thought, which create a little paradox. It's kind of where thinking stops and shit talking begins.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a big breakthrough for me in my ways of thinking about life was being able to be comfortable with paradoxes. And that was just so liberating.
So is it a teacup or not a teacup?
It's neither both.
I like that.
But yeah, a thing that helped me was seeing how they're opposites, but they're also related, and they're also in a spectrum. So they're a lot of paradoxes or a lot of opposites can be put into a scale of how different they are. So if you have night on one end and day on the other, there's actually a dawn and a dusk in between.
Mm.
And so if you look at the teacup and you say, well, is it or is it not? You can say, well, at one point it was not a teacup. Those atoms were not. It was night. And right now it's day. And pretty soon, or sometime, we don't know when, it will not be a teacup. And so in that sense, it is both, because it's on that scale of opposites.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think that's a really kind of Taoist way of thinking about it. You know, this yin yang thing. I did a little bit of qigong for a while with this this guy had studied a lot of Chinese martial art. It's like a meditative energy tai chi type thing.
So it's not sitting meditation. It's more like
it's a standing moving meditation.
Yeah,
it's definitely not fighting, but it's more like movement. You do it under trees, but he talked about, you know, you have this kind of yang of night and yin of day, and then you have the point where yin and yang collide, which is day and night. And and that's where all the energy is, right? So, I mean, putting aside these kind of metaphors or ways of thinking in terms of energy, I mean, maybe that's cool, maybe it's not. I have no perspective, but the kind of Chinese word for this point of collision is Dan Qian, you know, the collision of yin and yang. I mean, so is it a teacup or is it not? You can't argue with the fact, right?
Yeah. Do you think it's going to rain? Seems a bit smoggy for rain.
You know, it's actually amazing when it does rain here, because you can see a storm coming in over the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just something so wild about being able to see so far. We were here one night and there was this huge lightning storm coming in over the ocean. And I mean, you just behold the majesty of it, you know? I mean, I don't mean to sound Christian, but like it's
right. I was raised Christian, so
yeah. I mean, I just think it's incredible. I mean, there's just so much power. It's something that people in the Solomon Islands actually are really aware of. I mean, they have to be. Tidal waves, earthquakes, cyclones, like house-destroying cyclones. This is just part of their reality and always has been. I mean, but they're also dealing with the effects of climate change. It's only going to get worse for them. Their economy's screwed.
Is climate change real?
Yeah. I mean, well, is not, but like it is.
No,
right?
I don't mean, no. So hang on. I realize what I just said is not really best, following on from our paradoxical question about is the teacup real? Okay, philosophy and Zen aside, let's forget about that. I actually want to ask if you can tell me, is climate change real?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we live in a society that's structured in a way in the West where we segment people into certain areas of expertise, right? It's something to do with democracy where everyone, you know, like it used to be this old thing of everyone knew, like one philosopher king or whatever knew everything and was the guru. But now, because of science and all these different disciplines that we've kind of culminated over time, we're doing things like an ant mine, like we're an ant colony. We're working together to produce things that are bigger than any of us. And so I just have to rely on the testimony of people who study things really in depth, in good faith. And they're almost universally in consensus that like shit is happening. I don't know. Are you skeptical or?
I'm skeptical about a lot of things, but I also trust a lot of things. Is that too paradoxical? I don't know. Is that dodging the question too much? I don't feel strongly about it, and I'm happy to hear opinions about it. I'm not very politically aware, so right. I'm very open to being educated on political sciences, methods, trends, what I should do to vote, what I shouldn't do to vote. My main effort is my own. I need to take care of, like, I've got too much to deal with on my own front to really spend time thinking about politics.
Yeah, I agree. Politics is a mug's game, and I see a lot of these kind of public intellectuals that I really like. They get bogged down into politics because politics relies on agreement and disagreement, and I mean you're always just going to have that. I mean, to some extent, it's kind of constructive, like this kind of game of judo or something where you use your opponent's weight and you're throwing each other around and all these things. But I just think it's because it relies politics on any level, from, you know, the housemaid who doesn't clean the dishes to global governments. You're entering into a space of has or has not, is right or is wrong. And as soon as you enter into that space, you're disconnected from what it is to be fundamentally human. I'm not saying that it's not necessary to do these things. I mean, it's also, it's that constant challenge, right? Of, you know, something like meditation is the act of passivity to a large extent. I mean, you're sitting there and you're going inward, you're looking at yourself. And how does that relate to making positive change in the world? Is it not just this egotistical thing to sit down and do it? I mean, I kind of have some fundamental hope and belief that working on your own mind actually just has naturally will grow and extend into the world and create things that you want to create, right? I mean, if you are in a situation where you're talking to somebody that disagrees with you and you get angry, it's going to have a very different rippling effect to if you are somehow in control of how you feel in that moment and your mental states and emotional states.
So you're more calm about it because of a meditation practice.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when we think about something like climate change, right? I mean, it's so huge, and it's going to affect so many people, and it's just going to have this like huge effect. And then we think about how small we are. But I actually think that something like meditation, working on your tiny pool and allowing that to extend into the world. I mean, also, I think if you're meditating for yourself, then you're not really doing it, right? There's something in that moment when you let go that connects you compassionately to all beings of the world. And harnessing that feeling, like focusing on that and like bringing yourself back into this bodily sensation of motherly compassion for all beings will have the result of you doing actions that reflect that in the world. You know, I mean, that's all we can do about these small things, you know? I'm kind of less interested in talking about politics and more interested in trying to be a good person.
Yeah, I think we're definitely on the same wavelength there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You ask the good questions, man. That's a good way of putting it. You delve in where I need to think about these things. The other thing that shits me about politics is because I listen to Osho and he's always making fun of them. One of his jokes, it's something like, I'll never tell it as fancy as he does, but he goes, a monkey and a politician are sent on a mission to the moon. And when they arrive, they have their envelopes for their instructions. So the monkey opens up his. It says, check oxygen levels, check cabin pressure, check supplies, contact mission control, check fuel levels, check criticals. The list goes on for a while. And the politician opens up his. It says, take care of the monkey. But Osho was always telling those sorts of jokes at the expense of the politicians. So, yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of good, you know. I mean, it seems to be something particularly corruptive about power. And so if you're going to make fun of anyone, maybe make fun of the powerful.
Yeah.
Or yourself.
Yeah. That might be too easy for me.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking just before this about India and this kind of ashram practice. When I was in India,
tell me more about that.
Yeah, I went to Rishikesh, which is this place on the river Ganges, Ma Ganga, where it starts, right, close to the Himalayas. It's a super beautiful place, but full of spiritual tourism hippies from all around the world. They all go there to be on the river and do their thing. And I mean, it's cool. It's a vibe actually to just have these people come from
just
all
trying
around
to
the world
hide that
there.
skepticism or about spiritual tourism there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think development, like injection for India will be good, and then people don't always take away bad experiences from these things. Anyway,
whoa!
But I didn't do a kind of ashram experience in Rishikesh, but I did take my backpack with my tent in it, and I went hiking up into the mountains. And then I came across this guy who's living in a mud hut, just on the side of this mountain, like some clearings. And he was like a kind of Hindu holy man, like a Baba. He wasn't a priest, far from it, you know, but we kind of hung out heaps and we just kind of lived this religious life, and we'd cook food together, and we'd have people come through from all walks of life. We'd have wandering sadhus, wandering priests. They'd come through and we'd say, have some food, you know, have some
How did you get food? What sort of stuff were you eating?
A lot of dried kind of foods like dal and things like that, which you can prepare. We had water, like mineral water flowing there. I mean, water you can't really drink in India anywhere, but in this place, it was just natural mineral water and it was great. It was some of the best water I've ever drunk.
Wow.
Yeah. But we had this one guy come up when I was staying with Baba, who was studying in an Osho ashram. He was kind of like, I mean, he was kind of cracked out. He was definitely a pretty interesting character. But he was talking about this kind of laughing meditation that he was doing and all these different things. And
yeah, the Mystic Rose is one of the most like hardcore Osho meditations that I've heard about.
Well, what this guy was saying is like he's more or less just like laughing or like, you know, doing really short breaths, like
yeah.
He's hyperventilating, right? And I mean, if you do that for long enough, it's going to change the physical qualities of your brain. You're not going to have as much oxygen there, and then you're going to trip out. You know what I mean? If you don't pass out. But I don't know. For me, like, you know, I just kind of have this Zen bias, and for me, I would go, well, this is just special effects, you know. But then I'm kind of also into running, and I think, you know, that's probably a similar thing. It's a different way of breathing that facilitates some sort of like heightened experience. So
yeah, there's a lot of pretty out there Osho meditations that I've got into recently in there. If you walked in halfway through one of these, you know, group meditations, I think you'd really not know how to make sense of anything that's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, fundamentally what matters is that people are coming together and training or exploring their minds, you know? And it's like, you know, in Zen, it's like, is it Zen training or is it Zen, you know, or are there these other names that we can have for it which are less militaristic?
Yeah.
It's kind of all at the same time, you know? But what's really important is people coming together and holding space for each other to work inward, you know? I mean, instrumental music for me is a lot of the time like this, you know? You kind of go to a gig and you go there and everyone's got their eyes closed and you think, what is the music in this scenario? You know, it's actually just some conduit to hold space for people to experience themselves. I mean, that's not all that music is, but there's definitely some of that.
So you're into all sorts of musics, hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think we go back to Wollongong Con years.
Yeah, man.
It's probably when I first met you and I was doing jazz piano there. And you're doing drums, right?
Yeah. I can remember though, I think you and Finn and someone else did a gig at the Wollongong Con, like in this like children's ensemble. But no, like, you know, you took this big solo, you know, it was like, and you were like a few years older than me and whatever. And it was like, I just remember it blowing my mind, like this extended piano solo.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
So you're the one I impressed.
It's funny that, man, we just like, you're never conscious of how much of an impression you're making on other people, you know, in any circumstance. I once released this album of music and then I had someone that was like a friend of a friend or a relative of a friend come to me like 2 years later and go, oh man, I listen to that every day. Or like, you know, for like 2 days. But like, it's...
Yeah.
And I just thought that I'd done this thing and then no one had engaged with it at all anyway. You just can't monitor this shit, you know?
Yeah.
For the better, you know? You just kind of got to have like faith in your own value.
Have you got any current albums you want to talk about or plug or...
Yeah, I mean...
What was that thing you were saying before about your app?
Yeah.
So you built an app. I think that's just incredible because apparently they're just an absolute nightmare to get together.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm kind of really into it. But it's
do you write code?
Yeah. And then like, yeah, do some design stuff. But I taught myself to code. I mean, you're always standing on the shoulder of giants, you know? No one actually goes in when it comes to coding and goes, oh, well, I have to figure out how to connect this hardware component to this hardware component, right? All of that is already written. You just refer to this packet of predetermined information and you're more or less just like weaving them together, you know? Kind of just feel like a person weaving a basket, you know? But I mean, I loved it. It was a like stimulating activity. I recorded this music 2 years ago. I'll explain the project a little bit with my trio San, which is my brother and Novak Manojlovic. And it's kind of long form improvised music. We just went into the studio and played for a day and got all these long recordings. Some of them quite nice.
What instruments or instrumentation?
Yeah, so there's piano and there's electric guitar and there's drums and percussion. And
is it a person for each instrument or swap?
No, we're pretty like classical like that, instrumentalists. But then we made these recordings and then we kind of all went overseas for like extended periods of time, and so we didn't spend much time together. So it was just kind of sitting there and I'm thinking, well, what can I do for this project? It's not the kind of music that works in this Spotify playlist culture. Like you can't jump from Kanye West to like a half-hour meditative improv. It just doesn't work. It kind of needs to be curated into a particular space. And I feel like, most other mediums are just kind of like romantic kind of hangovers. I mean, you can't, like, I don't have a CD player anymore. I don't have a vinyl player. I kind of wish I did, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that...
I'm still on the CD player.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, though, like, if you make a CD, you're just going to kind of spend a lot of money and not many people are going to get access to it. Some people are, and sometimes it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
But I thought, actually, what I want to do is find some way to make a digital sanctuary, something like this, a dedicated, highly curated space where people can have a lasting and deep connection to the experience of exploring this music. So I kind of developed an app and I made some videos with some friends. A friend of mine, Natan Shlomo, he's like made a really amazing 10-minute video. And so you download this app through the App Store. It's going to be free. And then you're going to have the music and these videos and some sort of space to be able to consume that's away from most of the other thing that happens when we get onto our Lightbox and scroll through and get bombarded with information.
Is the app live now?
No, it's live on my phone, but I just need to put on the finishing touches. I'd say in a few months it'll be ready to go.
Nice.
Or even less.
And it's free.
Yeah.
So it's what, a gift to humanity? Or is there any want to generate something from it, generate money from it? Or
I mean, there's a donate button there because it costs a lot of money to make these things, but it's not I can't help but think that what I want to do with music has to be economic. As soon as I start to make it about trying to make money or things like this, it somehow changes the quality of what I'm trying to do. It's like this offering thing, or like, you don't do like 3,000 prostrations because you want to be reborn in a good life. I mean, well, people do. I mean, they do in China, but I just like, for me, it's just kind of like something else. It can't be economic.
A different motivation.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about drugs.
Oh, you want to talk about drugs?
Do you want to talk about drugs? I don't know if I should talk about drugs, man.
I mean, I have to, but it just seems like a bit of a cliche, doesn't it? To
talk
about meditation and then go, what about drugs?
Drugs, yeah. That's how you know when that's actually a classic. It's become like a meme now. When a YouTuber creator or a content creator starts talking about drugs, you're like, they're on the way out, man. They've run out of ideas.
It's funny though, like I do have one really nice little thing to say about drugs. I mean, I've got lots of nice things to say about drugs, but like...
You like drugs?
I mean, my... one of my Zen teachers, somebody asked her in this kind of public forum, if you take some sort of psychedelic drug and you have this profound experience, or you do 20 years of meditation and then have some sort of similar profound experience, what's the difference? She said, 20 years of meditation.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of profound,
It's a very... That's over my head, man.
Yeah, mine too.
Have you heard the theme song for this podcast?
No.
It's the song Over My Head.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's by a Canberra band, Dub Dub Goose, which was ANU jazz school students playing reggae.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really good band, really hot
Prime
rhythm,
time, man.
really hot rhythm section. But maybe I'll put the outro music under this,
Yeah, yes.
and I'll be saying it's over my head, and you'll hear the girl singing. Singing is is it over my head or out of my head? No, it's over my head. Well, whatever the song is, it's over my head. That's too much of a paradox, man. I can't get my head around that. Talk like this, talk like this, talk like this.
Okay, this is going to work. This is not so good. This is
definitely we're chanting.
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks for bringing your recording here to my house and having a cup of tea and a yarn.
Thank you so much, man.